Good morning. Today I'm going to show you how I felt oven mitts to complete making heat resistant oven mitts. So before you start, you need to have knitted the oven mitts that you want to felt, some kind of spatula or something for stirring, and I use common dish soap to help agitate the system. And of course you need a bucket of hot water. The water is hot enough that, you know, it might just start hurting your hands, but it's certainly not boiling. So to start off, I add, just kind of a dash of soap. It doesn't need to be a ton, but you certainly want some. And then I add, my oven mitts. Oof, it's warm. Into the system. I usually keep a towel nearby because, that way I can dry my hands off. So now, you get felting when you combine heat and agitation. And so the way that I do this is by using my spatula, I will stir the pot. And I finally started doing this this way because I got sick of my hands getting really chapped when I would agitate things by hand. And I would also find sometimes that you can, with hand agitation, you can actually end up manipulating the shape in a way that you don't necessarily like. I was making a bag that was shaped like a bag of grapes, and it had all these blobs that were to represent the grapes, and in felting it I was afraid that I would just get a flat mess, and so I tried it this way and it worked rather well. So you'll see that these bubbles are forming right now, and I guess I'll also mention that I don't use a washing machine because I don't have a top-loading washing machine. But you will notice that, after a little bit, the oven mitt seems to have stretched out a lot. Now this was worsted weight yarn knit with size 10.5 knitting needles. And so, it stretches out before, it starts coming together. And so with a reasonable amount of stirring, this is certainly easier in your hands than, if you were to be doing it yourself. And I was really pleased with the outcome. And closer to the end, you can certainly add, use some hand agitation if there's some spots that you want to check. Because since you'll be using these oven mitts, as oven mitts, you will really want to make sure that they are completely felted, because you don't want any of the skin of the user to come in contact with the hot pan that you deal with. Oven mitts are one of my favorite housewarming presents to make. They are great as a stash busting project, and they also, they're well received and they're useful. And so you never know what kind of knit gifts someone might need. So as you can see, I keep changing the direction a bit to kind of maximally agitate this. Now some people might also have you add some other items in here to help with the agitation. I've heard of some people will use a plunger and then put tennis balls in the bucket. Other people might use some like scraps of blue jeans or something that has some weight to it. But, so we've now been doing this for about 4 minutes, and the water's still pretty warm. And so you see that the fibers are starting to relax a bit, but there's still, we still have definition of the stitches, and we want the definition of the stitches to completely go away. And when you get tired, there's nothing wrong, and it won't hurt your felting process if you leave for a bit and then come back to it. All that, that might do is help the stitches relax some more, and yeah, so that's not problematic at all. I do make sure when stirring with the spatula, I don't want to catch and actually accidentally have it go through any of the stitches. So I make sure to pick it up occasionally, so that way there's just I'm not sticking it on a single spot of everything. And let's see if I can, the soaps kind of makes it kind of hard to see, but I am using these, oops, this is why I keep a towel nearby. I am using hand-dyed wool here. And so, you know, if you look at my dyeing methods at www.chemknits.com, you'll see that, hey, my colors are staying pretty true. Like these two greens were dyed by me, as was the yellow, and these two blues. So they will dull probably a bit by the end, but you know, there's only so much you can do. Yeah, so yeah, I will be back in a little bit and check in with you on the progress. So we're now about 10 minutes into the felting process. And unlike before, where when we looked at the oven mitt, the stitches were like really spread out and it seemed almost enlarged, you know, we're starting to really see some tightening of the stitches. We still have a lot of stitch definition, but it's really starting to tighten up and get felted. And let's look at the other one. I do like to squeeze out my felting project from time to time. I think my hands provide some additional agitation, and yeah, so this one, you know, with the other one you can really see the different rows, and then this one they're still tightening up and you can see that the individual stitches are getting fuzzy, and yeah, so it's coming along really nicely. So if your water starts to like get lukewarm or you feel like it's losing your heat, then you should definitely replace it. But you know, I think I typically will replace it, especially if I take a break in the middle and let it sit for a bit. I don't know if letting it sit actually does any good, but sometimes you need a break for your own good. So I will check back in a little bit. I've just added some new water to the bucket, and I'll add another little dash of soap. I lowered the water level this time because it can help with the agitation to have less volume of water, because it really forces whatever you're felting against the edges of your bucket and, you know, against each other to really force this agitation. Of course, it also appears to be making me splash more, but you can't have everything, right? And so, oops. Yeah, and, you know, so we just kind of continue stirring as before, and you can see that the oven mitts are starting to get a bit stiffer, which is a great sign because it means that they're felting up. You know, I'd say we're 16 minutes into this project, and you know, if we were felting a small item, this would happen a lot faster, but also if the item was super small, you wouldn't necessarily want to use a bucket method because, well, there wouldn't be enough agitation. But if you save up your projects so you have a lot of small items, then you can do them all at the same time. Let's check and see how we're doing here. So this one, not all definition will necessarily be lost because I alternated colors and lines, but you see it's really starting to felt up nicely. The test, and I don't know if you guys can see through, but the test I do is if I look through the inside of the felted object, if I can see light coming through it, then it's not enough. It's not felted enough for an oven mitt. Because sometimes you can still have a bit of stitch definition, but everything can be tight enough that it will work. So yeah, I don't know if that'll work for you guys to see, but we're certainly making progress. And once it really starts to be felted, then the end kind of starts happening a little bit faster. Or at least it seems that way, because it often seems like for a while, you know, nothing is happening and you're not getting anywhere. So So keep at it and, you know, check it every so often, and you'll notice that the stitches loosen and then things will start to get tight again. So I will be back when we are closer to the end. So we've now passed the 21-minute mark, and as you know, we proceed more towards the end, I like to check how they're doing a bit more frequently. This is also where, in the case with oven mitts, I would start doing some hand agitation, because really, you know, the things are getting close and it's just some spots and that need more help. And with particular, with oven mitts, the thumb gusset and the palm of the hand need work. So when I do some hand agitation, kind of put my hands on either side of the oven mitt and I move them in like a swirly motion. Now, again, I'll say that the smaller the item, the faster, you know, this all will come together. But you'll also see that different yarns will felt, oh look, see that's starting to look really nice. Different yarns will felt at different rates. So you typically, you know, a white bleached or very pale color wool won't necessarily felt very fast at all. And so that's just kind of something that you want to keep in mind when you're choosing your project. Now, if you go for your own colors, like I did here, I was using undyed wool, which had not been bleached. So therefore, they should still felt just fine. Now, if you were felting, say, a hat or something, you would want to be doing more checks, I guess, at various points, because the fit there is important. But as you can see with the oven mitt, you know, fit is not a concern at this point. And this is a pattern that I've made a number of times. And so worst case scenario, if you overfelt an oven mitt, then you have something for a kid's play kitchen. Yeah. So I'm going to now agitate the other one and put this one back in the water. But you can also do these agitations while things are wet, you know, without having it squeezed out. And that also helps, you know, keep some heat in there. But I like having it wrung out because while it's, you know, wet and soapy, things sometimes look like they're farther along than they actually are. But in doing this, you can feel the stitches, and you can start to feel when you start getting close. So. And so one of the last thoughts I want to leave you with is that, you know, you can do hand felting, and you can do it entirely hand felting, and right now we're very close to done, and it's been, you know, probably a total of 35 minutes, including time it's taken me to go get some water, or to refill the water. But I want you to leave you with the thought that you can use this to supplement machine felting. So after, you know, a cycle through the washing machine, you know, if you have a hat and it's still too big, you can felt it by hand so that way you can keep a closer eye on, you know, the shape and your progress. But yeah, and so then once you finish up, you will rinse out the soap, tweak it, hang it up to dry. You know, if, I'll see if I can mess it up a bit, if as your hand agitation happens, you know, something gets kind of bent out of shape, the felted fabric is very malleable, so, you know, you can very easily adjust it back into, say, a thumb shape. And so here, you know, we're actually very, very close to done. The only reason why we still see some stitch definition is that I changed the color every other row. But I hope that this tutorial has been helpful to you, and, you know, check back and make sure you follow me to see what other helpful knitting tips I have. Happy knitting!